Hosting the discussion today is Guy, and I'm going to turn it over to him.
Well, thanks, Kyle and the BASF team for having us. We're looking forward to this conversation, and we're going to put Dr. Keys on the spot first. Dr. Keys, how important is innovation to BASF?
It's been a very exciting 6 months since we received that registration. It's 2 new products. We've got great efficacy. We've seen excellent turf tolerance. It's just been a lot of fun to have a new DMI to be playing with and adding it to our portfolio.
So we might have some people in the audience that aren't familiar with everyone. Just let's go around the panel and explain who you are, where you work, and what are some of your current research focuses.
Yeah, my name is Rick Lattin, and I worked at Purdue University for 38 years in turfgrass since 1990 as a turfgrass pathologist, and worked with all kinds of fungicide chemistry against a variety of diseases that are big issues, contemporary issues in the Midwest.
I'm Bruce Martin. I'm just recently retired from Clemson University, and I was stationed at the PD Research and Education Center, which is near Myrtle Beach, about an hour away, and was with Clemson 31 years. Actually started with field crops and morphed into turf in the early 90s, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me, I think, and continued working on turf until I retired. So cool season and a lot of warm season grass pathology.
I'm Jim Kearns. I'm at NC State University, the turf pathologist there. So much like Bruce, we get to work on everything. We have a lot of warm season grass now in the state, and basically the focus of my research has been primarily root diseases, trying to understand how fungicides move and how we can optimize the efficacy of these products.
I'm Bruce Clark. I'm the turfgrass pathologist at Rutgers University, and the focus of my research over the past 38 years has been looking at the identification and control of major turfgrass diseases attacking cool season grasses and trying to improve fungicide efficacy and show the impacts, particularly of cultural practices, on disease development.
And I'm Renee Keys. I'm with BASF. I'm the R&D project leader for turf and ornamental products. So I work with the early stage compounds, numbered compounds, trying to figure out how we're going to use them, how we're going to write the label, and actually getting the label written and submitted to EPA for registration.
Speaking of registration and new innovations, BASF launched Maxtiva and Navicon Intrinsic last year. For each of the researchers, when did you first start working with those innovations, and what have you learned about them over that period?
Anybody to start? Well, I started working with it in 2013. It was a numbered compound. We knew it as a BASF or BAS 750, and this is what Maxtima is. And working with it against mostly dollar spot, but looked at it against other diseases as well. And then you add the Navicon, or the Navicon has the pyraclostrobin in there, and we observed the efficacy of that against a variety of diseases, including anthracnose and brown patch.
My first trials, I think, were in 2014, so a year later than when Rick started. Also started with dollar spot. We still have bent grass in South Carolina, although not much, but still do work on dollar spot at times. And then in later years, we started looking at it on spring dead spot, which is a major root disease of bermudagrass. And then in more recent years, it's been a shift to also include take-all root rot, and that's been the main things that I've worked with.
I think we started in 2013, 2014. Very similar to Bruce, we started with dollar spot, anthracnose, brown patch with Maxtima and Navicon, and then transitioned into, it's kind of become a gold standard for spring dead spot for us in our work. We've had some really nice fairy ring trials with it as well. And then I think one of the biggest ones of an innovation is how well it's performed for us for take-all root rot of bermudagrass.
And similar to the other gentleman, I've been working probably for 6 years on both Maxtima and Navicon, and really been impressed by its great control of dollar spot. Also, we did a lot of work on anthracnose. It does superb on anthracnose as well. And most recently, been working with summer patch, so another ectotrophic root infecting disease.
How about you, Dr. Keys? It's been a long process for you.
Right. You can tell in 2013 was the first year I wrote research protocols. Everybody was referring to 2013. And Dr. Martin, you were one of the first people that did some of the phyto testing for us on the ultra-dwarf Bermuda grasses when we didn't know what it was, but we started to see some really big differences in what we observed with turf tolerance.
Was that 2013?
That was 13.
My memory's not what it used to be. 2 weeks ago, I can pretty well nail that, but other than that. Now, that was pretty interesting, those trials, because, the BASF wasn't admitting that they had a DMI. I should have figured it out because we were testing it with a known DMI that growth-regulated bermudagrass, and in those trials, that growth-regulating DMI did what it was supposed to do, and it pretty well nailed some bermudagrass, and this numbered compound was benign. So I do remember looking at those plots going, well, there's nothing going on here. It's okay, whatever this is.
Yeah, how exciting was it to get access with a new DMI and perform trials on it for each of you?
Well, this came at a time when there were resistance issues with other DMIs, and of course we were dealing with the growth regulator issues, especially on turfgrass in the Midwest. So it came at a time when we were looking for something different, something broad spectrum that we could actually apply in our programs in the heat of the summer and use against strains of the dollar spot pathogen that were trending towards insensitivity. So it came at a great time for our industry, and it was very nice as a researcher to have that in my hands and see what we could do in terms of showing this off to our superintendents.
For us, I agree with Rick. It came at just the right time. We needed a DMI. We actually needed some DMI chemistry back in the portfolio, I think, because the trend in the recent years had been with SDHI fungicides, and there's a lot of those new fungicides on the market now. But that DMI chemistry does some things that SDHIs don't do, and the fact that this one did not growth regulate either bent grass or, in our case, a lot of ultra-dwarf Bermuda grasses, it gave us some options that we were kind of missing. So it was very timely.
I agree with Bruce and Rick on that. I think maybe one of the things that came at the right time was about the time we figured out it was a DMI and how effective it was. We really started to see a lot of take-all root rot on Bermuda grass, and we didn't have. People were very nervous about DMIs, and that was really the class of chemistry that was going to provide the most control. And having this one to go out, and I know with everybody here they did it at BASF, really did a good job of looking at every combination I think, Renee, you thought of as far as growth regulators and time of the year, and that was what was really cool is how safe it was, and to have that class of chemistry again.
No, I would agree, and the other thing which I think was really exciting to find out was that without the PGR effects, we weren't seeing thinning, and therefore weren't seeing ingress of algae, and algae is a tremendous problem in the summertime. And one of the reasons, I agree with Bruce Martin, one of the reasons why I think superintendents have been backing away for the use of DMIs in hot weather, for fear not only of phyto, but also of increasing algae formation where we get a lot of thinning.
Dr. Clark, in what ways does having access to this type of DMI help golf course superintendents?
Well, I think it is follow up with the line of reasoning that I think superintendents have been backing away from the use of DMIs in hot weather. That's a real mistake in my estimation. DMIs are a great broad spectrum class of fungicides. Having those in, even at reduced rates, is a help, but if you can utilize a product like Maxtima at even a high label rate in hot weather, it opens up a whole raft of possibilities in terms of rotating and putting products in when they are most effective, not when you are least afraid of putting them out.
Anyone else have anything to add to that? I know Dr. Martin and Dr. Kearns have studied it a lot on Bermuda grass.
Well, it lines up nicely, having efficacy, really high efficacy for spring dead spot and take all root rot. For us, being in the transition zone, kind of a weak time for Bermuda grass. It's when it's going into dormancy in the fall, and if we start to have these tropical depressions that are rolling up the East Coast, we better have some strong chemistry. And with this chemistry, with the same applications, we can get those two diseases, plus some foliar disease that may develop. Because these are xylem mobile fungicides, they will translocate and control foliar disease as well, even though we're watering them in for the root diseases.
It's kind of shocking we made it this far into a discussion with researchers and we haven't talked about fungicide resistance yet. How big of an issue is this entering our new decade, and what can this DMI help to solve some of the resistance issues that maybe superintendents face?
Well, I'll take a stab at that one first, okay? I think we all know that fungicide resistance is probably the most important contemporary issue of the day. We're worried about it with all our single-site compounds. Now, I think I was among the very first to demonstrate that the Maxtima, this active ingredient in Maxtima, the new DMI, was effective against strains of the dollar spot pathogen that were trending towards insensitivity towards DMI fungicides. And that's something that we didn't expect, but it showed it in several different field trials, and we could see it in our laboratory trials as well. So to round it out, it is a very serious issue, and we feel as though we have a new DMI that can be used judiciously and strategically on fairways in areas where the predominant strain is resistant to other DMIs.
Anyone else have anything to add on that?
I guess we saw a very similar thing. I think after Rick found it, we had a test with it in our mountains in North Carolina, and it was flawless. And 2 other DMIs that we used, I mean, totally failed in the trial. So having that is really, really nice. I think on Bermuda grass, one of the things I started noticing is people were sending in samples was the whole plethora of SDHIs that were being applied. So now we're allowed to insert a DMI back into that chemistry or into that program and hopefully protect that class of chemistry for another, 10 or at least till I make it to 38 years. I'm the only one here that had.
Can I just add? We've taken it the next step at BASF based on reports we were hearing in the field and done some of the laboratory work looking at other DMIs where we have seen trending toward insensitivity. And the Maxtima is just inherently so efficacious, and it binds so strongly in the plant and to the fungi that we're seeing a level of control we haven't observed before. And so on some of those other DMIs where we're seeing failure, the Maxtima is still providing control.
Maxtima and Navicon Intrinsic received registration last summer, so it's already been in the hands of many superintendents. Dr. Clark, what do you learn about a new innovation once it gets out on the field and superintendents start using it? Do they come to you with a lot of questions at that point?
I think they do. The beauty of actually being a researcher looking at products well in advance is that you already have a very good idea of how well a product's going to perform. Then when it gets out into common use, you start seeing how it's being used and how effective it is, or if there are some issues. And I think that's the important thing. And so far what I've seen with Maxtima and Navicon is people have used it and really liked it. They've liked the control they're getting, and using Navicon even improves the control even more broadly with diseases like brown patch. So it's been nice to see how it's been used, and I think it just goes along exactly the way it's tracked with the experimental use.
I'll just add, yesterday Dr. McCarty and I taught our Ultradwarf bermudagrass seminar, and several of the superintendents had used Maxtima. One in particular had a chronic problem with mini ring disease caused by Rhizoctonia zea, and he reported really excellent control, which is unusual because we have not had good control with fungicides curatively for mini ring, and he got excellent control. And I just finished a trial this past fall where we did early curative work with mini ring, and we also got excellent control. So that's another disease we can add to the list that's been kind of plaguing us in the South with not too good of answers, at least from the standpoint of fungicides.
Dr. Lattin, has there been anything you've learned in the last 6 to 8 months that you didn't know before it reached the field?
What I've learned recently is getting feedback from the superintendents who have been using it and have reported back to me that even where, especially with their resistance issues, they reported back to me that they're very satisfied and impressed with the performance of it. So it sort of supports or underscores what we first observed several years ago, that it's quite effective even where insensitivity is showing up.
Dr. Kearns, how do you see Maxtima and Navicon Intrinsic fitting into a program in the transition zone and the types of turf you study?
That's a good question. I think that's what's nice about the DMI is it allows the superintendent and the practitioner to be flexible where they want to put it. You can put it in the summer if you're dealing with mini ring on bermudagrass, or you can put it in the fall of the year if you're dealing with spring dead spot or take-all. For bent grass, one of the things I'm excited about is we still have about half the state still bent grass. Is getting them to start with a DMI first of the year. We still have issues on bent grass with anthracnose, and I think part of the reason was so many people were starting their year with an SDHI and not the DMI chemistry. And I think based on your work, it brings a lot to the table. So that's what I think is really cool, is that whatever challenge they have, there's the flexibility to move both products around.
I'm just going to add to that. I totally agree. And when it comes right down to it, the fact that a product like Maxtima has really great efficacy against key diseases like dollar spot, anthracnose, and summer patch really allows superintendents to really put it into the program at strategic times. And I agree with the spring application, because with all those SDHI applications starting off in the spring, a lot of superintendents have been overusing that chemistry. And to allow you to go in with something like a Maxtima in the springtime, you can often get 3 diseases at one time. Anthracnose, summer patch, and then also dollar spot. So that's important.
Well, I agree with what they said. I'm not much to add other than when you have that flexibility from this DMI chemistry, it actually opens up possibilities to use other chemistry, because a lot of the new labels are only allowing a couple of apps, and so that puts a lot of pressure on when you can use these materials. So gives you another option, allows you to change things up in your total program.
We're getting the wrap-up sign over there. Does anyone have any closing thoughts about Maxtima, Navicon Intrinsic, DMIs, what to look for in 2020s? The floor is to each of you. Anything to add to this discussion?
I'm going to add that although this is a very broad spectrum, very effective chemistry, I would hope that we use it very strategically and not make the same mistakes that we made in years past with other chemistry, where we overused it. So many sequential sprays, and that's how the resistant strain became predominant in the population. We have sort of a reset, kind of a mulligan here, especially with something with dollar spot and on bent grass or POA fairways. And so work with whomever you can to be very strategic in using this Maxtima. You'll be very happy with it, and let's keep it around for a long time.
That was going to be my comment as well, is to protect the chemistry. We need to be able to rotate it and judiciously insert it into a program so that you'll get the efficacy you're looking for.
Well, this was a great discussion. Thanks to the panelists for their time, and thanks to the BASF team for having us. It wouldn't be a golf course or golf industry show booth presentation without a contest. So there's something going on here. Please share one thing you learned from today's panel session on Twitter using hashtag BASF Groundbreakers and hashtag GIS 2020 for a chance to win a pair of Costa sunglasses. 2 winners will be randomly selected this evening and notified via Twitter. And also, we have panels here at 1 p.m. with a group of warm weather superintendents and 4 p.m. with cool season superintendents. So we're hoping you can join us for that.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Guy.